Hi everyone. So as said, my name is Julien Lépine, and as you can hear from my accent, I'm based in France. I'm based in Paris. We're going to be talking today around how AWS Directory Service for Microsoft Active Directory can be used in your existing and new environments on AWS to better and more efficiently manage your Active Directory environments. So we're going to have a lot of points to cover today. I just want to get back again on the logistics. The presentation is going to be around 30 minutes, and we're going to have 15 minutes of Q&A. Again, you can use the Q&A pod during the entire presentation. We have a team of moderators that are going to be answering it. And in the end, we're going to take some of the questions that you're going to be asking and answer them directly with Ron on the line. And yes, you're going to have the slides and again, the videos that are going to be available for you for download after the webinar. So what we're going to be covering, we're going to see some examples of how AWS Cloud Workloads actually use Active Directory and how you can build efficient and secure Active Directory practices on top of AWS. Then we're going to see some options for integrating your cloud-based directory and your workloads with Active Directory. We'll see how AWS Directory Service can help you build and use managed environments for your Active Directory practices. We'll see some overview of identity federation, a deeper dive on setting trusts, which is one of the key elements and most strong priorities for building a secure environment on top of AWS. And then we'll have some guidance on how to manage your AWS managed domain. So let's get started. Why AWS Cloud Workloads need Microsoft Active Directory? Well, there's a few reasons why you need to use Active Directory on top of AWS. The first one that is the most required from our customers is the ability to have single sign-on. Provide your users with a seamless way to use applications, whether they're going to be deployed in your on-premises environment or in the cloud within AWS. Then the second thing that is really key for our customers is being able to manage and access your cloud resources using Active Directory groups and using the same familiar platforms that you've been using for years now. And the last one is you want to be able to enforce policies, whether it's for Amazon EC2 Windows Server or Linux. If you want to do RDS for SQL Server with AD group policies, domain integration, we have many features that are actually leveraging these AD platforms on AWS. So there's multiple options for using Active Directory in the AWS cloud. The first one, which we're going to be presenting today, is the opportunity to use a managed service, namely AWS Directory Service for Microsoft Active Directory, which we also call AWS Microsoft AD. You can also deploy and manage your own Active Directory on top of Amazon EC2. It's more work because you're going to have to configure and manage and patch and backup and do all the heavy lifting of managing your environment, but you're going to have full control, so it's a fully valid option. And finally, you can domain join your AWS cloud resources to your on-premises Active Directory domain. We're not going to be covering that specific topic during the webinar today, and it does impose some specific elements of high availability and latency specifically on the network. So it's a practice that is still available, not the one that we see the most often in our customers' environment, but still something you have to keep in mind when you start architecting an Active Directory platform on top of EC2. So one of the questions that we ask you in the poll, and really we want you to consider and ask us questions around whether it makes sense for you, is how do you use Active Directory with your existing cloud workloads today on AWS? There's multiple options here. So you can use AWS Directory Service for Microsoft Active Directory, which again, we're going to be speaking more in detail. You can use Active Directory running on Amazon EC2 Windows Server. So self-built, self-managed Active Directory environment. You can use, if my clicker works, it's back. You can domain join your workloads to your on-prem, or you can use other practices. Either not use Active Directory, use one of the services such as AWS Directory Service Simple AD or AD Connector, which are also valid options. Please give us your feedback on what you're using on the platform and what are your key requirements. Again, one of the reasons why we do ask that is we have the chance of having Ron on the phone, which is one of the product managers for Directory Service. And the way we drive our roadmaps and we drive the feedback of and the evolutions of our services is by having direct customer feedback. So please get back to us on what are the key needs that you do have. It's going to help us shape the product for the future versions. And of course, last one was no solution, which is not the best solution, definitely. So how do you build Active Directory best practices on top of AWS? There's 4 key pillars that our customers are mainly requiring when deploying Active Directory on top of AWS. The first one is they want to have highly secure environments. And that security is going to come from the network level by the use of Amazon VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. It may come with specific encryption needs that you want to have for your machines, such as all the volumes need to be encrypted before being stored. And all these features are actually provided by the AWS platform, most of them for free. So you can have the full benefits of these environments. And we'll see later in the deep dive part of this webinar that you can even have more visibility on the environments that you may even have on premises today. People want to have reliability. In the schema that you have on the left of the screen, you see that we have created 2 domain controllers. Each one of them is deployed in a separate availability zone. Each availability zone is a set of data centers that is completely isolated from one another. So you have multiple sets of data centers that are going to be hosting your directory or your Active Directory environment. That provides highly resilient infrastructure. And they're going to be joined to the same domain. And that domain can be deployed in one region or go global if you want to have multiple regions. You can create meshes, and using the sites and topology features of Active Directory, you can build a global environment with Active Directory. And finally, compliance, that comes with all the certifications that we've been working on, as well as the audit features that you do have. So even if you work in a stringent security environment, you can build an Active Directory that actually mimics your exact needs and answers to the regulations that you're accustomed to. Most of our big customers want to have a hybrid enterprise. They have on-premises environment with possibly multiple data centers. So here, as an example, we have something in London and in Paris. And what they want to have is they want to have that seamless integration between on-premises and AWS. And again, we're going to be building a highly available AWS-based environment that actually we can join to the same domain. So if your hybrid enterprise is using both on-premises environments and cloud-based environments, for your machine, it can just be exactly the same domain. And using the costs, which is again part of the Active Directory sites and services and the topologies that you can build around Active Directory, you can build a platform that is going to be highly resilient, even in terms of multi-region or multi-environment, such as on-prem and AWS-based. So that's one of the best practices we see within customers. But that requires to have self-managed environments. And here it requires to have a common view between your on-premises environment and your AWS-based environment. And one of the requirements that we do see from many of our customers is to have a separation between their user identities that actually live on premises with their existing AD environment that they have maybe in their core office or in some data centers that they're using on-prem. And they want to have resource-based environments on top of AWS. Because it makes sense, on AWS you have many features that are not built for on-premises, which are like machines joining a domain and leaving a domain using auto-scaling groups, and many of these features. So what a lot of customers do is actually use and leverage their on-premises environment, and instead of having one global extended and hybrid enterprise, they're going to be creating a hybrid enterprise by leveraging trusts. They're going to be creating a new forest or a new domain within AWS, and leveraging the trust, they're going to have a domain on AWS that manages their production environment and machines, and via the trust, it's going to be able to access their on-premises machine. And again, that's one of the best practices. You can use VPNs or Direct Connect to have this connectivity, but still, it's a lot of infrastructure to manage. You're going to have to manage these new machines, configuring the domain and configuring the trust and managing and maintaining the trust, which is a hassle if you want to have an enterprise that is as agile as the cloud can provide you. That's exactly why we actually built a service, which is AWS Directory Service for Managed Active Directory. And Directory Service for Managed Active Directory gives you exactly that setup, but just in a fully automated way. You're going to have a new domain and a forest that is going to be hosted on AWS. you can create a trust with your on-premises environment and just leverage that to provide SSO, so single sign-on for your users. And you're going to have automated patching. You're going to have automated backup. You're going to have automated high availability and disaster recovery by leveraging multi-AZ. So all of the features that are actually heavy lifting for building a secure and reliable environment on top of any platform is just provided for you as a service. And to be able to dive deeper on this service, I'm going to leave the floor to Ron, that's going to present you some of the features that we do have within Directory Service for Microsoft Active Directory. Ron, up to you.
Thanks, Julian. So the Managed Microsoft Active Directory service is a high availability service that is built on top of Windows 2012 R2 domain controllers. When you create the directory, you get 2 different domain controllers, each in a different availability zone. And it takes about 3 clicks to get this going. You open it up, you specify the name of your domain, you specify the password for your administrator account, and you specify which VPC that you want that directory to be in, and the rest all just happens. So then once the directory is started, you just use normal Active Directory tools to manage the users and computers. We'll be talking a little bit more about that later. You can use the directory either standalone if you want to and have your users in the cloud, or you, as Julian mentioned, you can have the trust to your on-premises directory for single sign-on. In addition to using it with typical Active Directory aware applications, you can also use the service to work with EC2, which we'll be talking about. RDS SQL Server uses it for authentication and authorization. You can use it with workspaces for VDI, with QuickSight, Enterprise, or Chime Plus and Pro. In addition to that, there are a couple things you want to know. When we set up the directory, AWS is the domain administrator of the directory. You get an organizational unit that we give you delegated administrative control over. And then there are a few things you want to make sure you're aware of. There's not every application will work with a product, because there may be some features of the directory that we are unable to enable at this point because of the domain administration model of the system. But it does work with a broad variety of applications, including things like SharePoint and SQL Server Always On groups. Now, in terms of the administration and management of the system, we operate the system, and we do all of the deployments, the patching, the monitoring, the DC recovery, snapshot, restore, and your responsibility is simply managing the users that are inside the directory, doing the GPOs and that type of activity. All right, we've got a quick poll question for you. We want to understand which of the following are the most important to you in terms of a managed Active Directory service from AWS. Is it high availability for the managed infrastructure? Is it that it's built on actual Microsoft Active Directory, or that it does not require you to sync your identities to the cloud? Thank you very much. All right, so as we mentioned earlier, you can create a trust with the directory to your on-premises network. And this is done first by enabling it on your side of the network. So you go to your directory and you open up the Properties tab and you add the trust and configure that. And then once you've done that, you go into the AWS Directory Services console, and there's a tab for adding a trust relationship. You specify the name of your on-premises domain. You add the password that is creating the trust, and you specify the direction, whether that's a one-way trust or a two-way trust. You also configure the conditional forwards and then just click add, and that's how you create the trust. Once that's done, then if you take a look at the details section of the directory, you will see that the directory has conditional forwarders configured and that it has a two-way trust that's operating. Now, one of the features that we've built into the product is the ability to use on-premises user identities and have them work with IAM roles for managing AWS resources. So in this example here, in the top of the screen, you have Active Directory users that you're maybe on your corporate network, and through the trust to managed AD, they're going to have access to the roles in IAM. So we simply create a assignment of users or groups to specific IAM roles, and then when your users log into the console with their on-premises Active Directory identity, they have access to those roles and can manage the resources in the cloud. So it's a pretty convenient way of doing this without having to set up SAML configurations and so forth. Now, in this case, what we're showing is that we have we've created a role, we've assigned a user to it, and now when that user logs into the console, then they have access to those services to manage them. If you're using the directory with one of the AWS applications and services such as Workspaces or WorkDocs or QuickSight, you have the ability to use multi-factor authentication when you log into those applications with your Active Directory user identity. And this is done in the directory. When you open your directory, you'll see the list of tabs for apps and services, schema extensions, snapshots, and multi-factor authentication. You go to the multi-factor authentication tab, and that's where you specify the address of your Radius server, the port number for it, the shared secret for the Radius connection, and the protocol to be used. And then you can set your timeouts for the authentication. And then when a user goes to Workspaces or tries to log into WorkDocs, then they will be required to specify their MFA when they log in. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can use the directory for a broad range of applications. Recently, we added some new capabilities to the system for managed service accounts and for Kerberos constrained delegation, which allowed us to enable applications such as Microsoft SharePoint, Microsoft SQL Server Always On availability groups, and Microsoft Dynamics. So you can run quite a few different applications that in the cloud and use a managed Active Directory rather than having to do all the heavy lifting of managing the infrastructure on your own. Now, I want to take a moment and dive a little bit deeper into trusts, just to make sure that many people are not familiar with doing these, and I want to make sure we cover a little bit of ground on them. When you set up a trust, there is a trusting side and a trusted side. So the trust goes from the trusting side to the trusted side, as shown in the upper right-hand section of this slide. The access is in the opposite direction. So the trusted network can access resources in the trusting side of the network. In this particular case, I have AWS Microsoft AD in the cloud as the trusting side, and the trusted side is your on-premises Active Directory. Now, trusts are a time-tested and secure model for connecting two forests together and allowing resources to be shared between two different forests. Now, in this particular case, it's different than the classical, back when Active Directory first came out, it was about doing trust between companies or between acquired businesses. In this case, you're doing a trust between your on-premises network and your VPC in the cloud, and you control both sides of this. So your trust you have a lot more control over your trust. Now, the trusting forest has no administrative control over the trusted forest. So even though you've got this trust in place, there's no way for a rogue administrator in the trusting side to gain access to control over the on-premises forest. The trusted users have access to cloud resources as long as you've entitled them to do so by adding them to security groups that your resources in the cloud will allow the user to come in through. And again, you get to control both sides of that, so you get to have some pretty fine-grained control on resource access. The resources that are in the cloud have no access to the on-premises resources, unless on the on-premises side of the trust, unless the resources on the on-premises side allow this, and you have granted permissions to the users that are in the cloud. Now, the way that you manage this typically is you create a security group that's in the cloud, and those security groups are used by the resources in the cloud. So as an example, let's say you have RDS SQL Server that you're using with the AWS Microsoft AD. You would create a security group that RDS SQL Server uses to authorize access to the tables. And then in your on-premises network, you would add your users from on-premises to the security group in the cloud, or better yet, you create a security group in your on-premises network, you add the users to that security group and add the on-premises security group to the cloud. What this model does is it allows you to manage access to the applications that are running in the cloud by simply adding and removing users to security groups in your on-premises network. Now, you need to decide whether you need to have a trust or have a one-way or a two-way. And the bottom line is that if you don't have a need for any of the users from one forest to access resources in another forest, then there's no reason to have a trust, and don't set one up. If you have a need, let's say that you're using RDS SQL Server in the cloud and you want it to work with your on-premises Active Directory user identities, then you would create a one-way trust from the Active Directory in the cloud to your on-premises directory. And once you've done that, then you can use the security group authorization model to access the RDS SQL Server in the cloud. Now, there are some times that you may need to have a two-way trust. And a two-way trust is needed today for some of the AWS applications, such as Workspaces, QuickSight, and Chime. And what they need the two-way trust for is that when you configure Workspaces or these other applications, they need to be able to read your on-premises directory to look up users that they provision into that application. Once they've read the user and created the user in their application, the trust from the on-premises side to the cloud is no longer used. It's only used to provision those applications. And then after that, the trust from the Microsoft AD in the cloud to the on-premises directory is used for the authentication phase of that communication. And what you can also do is make sure that you secure your trusts as well. And the ways that you can secure them are the following. First, when you create a trust, and this is on by default, whether you're creating the trust in your on-premises network or in the cloud, SID filtering is on. Security identifiers are part of Kerberos tickets that get passed between the trusts. And if a user has moved to different locations in the directory, they may have a number of different SIDs that are associated with them. The most current SID is the one that is used for the authentication authorization to the resources in the cloud. If their Kerberos ticket contains some of their older SIDs, there's a potential security risk there. So SID filtering strips out all of the old SIDs from the Kerberos ticket so that there's no way for those to be exploited in the cloud. And another thing you can do is you can turn on selective authentication in the on-premises side of the trust if you have a two-way trust. And what this does is it acts as a sort of a firewall to reduce what users can access. If they don't have access to a resource, there's no way for them to authenticate against the resource. And this link that I've provided in this slide, it provides an article about securing trust a little bit more. It talks about SID filtering and selective authentication. Another thing you can do is only permit the trust ports to be opened between the domain controllers in the cloud and the domain controllers in your on-premises network. And that way you don't have more open across your link between your VPC and your on-premises network than is necessary. And then finally, for the cloud clients to Active Directory, so any of the cloud clients that need to talk to Active Directory, only permit the AD authentication ports to your on-premises network and minimize all of the other ports from the cloud to the on-premises network. And that way you don't have users in the cloud accessing more resources or trying to access more resources in your on-premises network than is necessary. And this link that I provided in this slide talks about how to configure firewalls for domain trusts. And then finally, don't grant groups in the cloud access to on-premises resources. That will make sure that if you do have a two-way trust, that they're not going to access anything in your on-premises network. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Julian to talk a little bit more about some of the other aspects of managing the system.
Thanks, Ron. So yeah, we had already multiple questions on how do you manage your users and computers? And one of the great things of using AWS Directory Service for Managed AD for Microsoft Active Directory is actually you can use exactly the same tools. So from any domain joined instance, once you're in the cloud, you can connect to your Active Directory environment and just manage it using the same tools. So you want to use users and computers, sites and services, DNS, or any other tool, you can basically do so directly. And same via the trust, you can from your on-prem environment access anything you want and manage it using their existing tools. So there's no new tool, there's no new process that needs to be implemented within AWS to make sure that you can have instances. It's pure AD and pure AD trust that actually help you extend your on-premises environment to AWS or build a new AWS environment from scratch. So really, familiarity is one of the key elements here. One of the things you can do as well in terms of familiarity is work around GPOs. So if you want to use group policy objects, you can use them from your on-prem environment, of course, but you can, on the AWS Active Directory, create GPOs that are going to be applied to your machines. Really important if you want to use, for instance, workspaces or any Amazon EC2 instance that is connected. And if you want to have that SSO environment for WorkDocs or WorkMail and some of these environments, and you want to have fully Kerberos integrated authentication, you can do that and define that as well using the GPOs. So all the best practices that you've been implementing on premises for years now is something that you can just extend to your cloud environment and just integrate and use directly. But there's new features that are associated with using managed AD or Microsoft AD on AWS. One of these features is actually the possibility to have what we call seamless domain join. When you start a new Amazon EC2 instance running Windows, you can just by clicking on one button, which is here the domain join directory, you select an existing AWS directory service instance, and your machine is going to be automatically joined to that domain. It's going to have the GPOs applied and all the security that you've defined as an enterprise level. You don't need anymore to manage the passwords and manage the fact that you need to connect to the machines and join them to the domain. But some of our customers want to use other ways of integrating machines to the domain, not necessarily just by joining them when they start the machines, because sometimes they have some specific processes they need to run before. And we have other ways to do that. One of them is by leveraging Amazon EC2 Systems Manager run command. Systems Manager is a suite of 7 tools that is going to help you fully manage and automate your Windows fleet on top of AWS. From running command to patching to inventory management and maintenance, you have many processes that are going to be available for that. And you can run these same commands, of course, because we're programmatic, by using the AWS CLI here as an example on Linux, but it works exactly the same using PowerShell if you run Windows-based commands. So really an easy way to get integrated to your domain for your existing instances. Another thing that you can benefit from by leveraging AWS Directory Service for Microsoft Active Directory is the integration of SQL Server that is running on Amazon RDS directly to your AD domain. So Amazon RDS is relational database service. It's a fully managed database environment that can run multiple database engines, including SQL Server from 2008 to 2016 on top of AWS. So the same features that we've been presenting you around Active Directory, you actually have for SQL Server. And when you start a new SQL Server environment, again, you just need to click and select a directory. Once you've selected that directory, actually, you can directly use the security within your SQL Server environment and reference groups that are going to be on an external domain. Here, ext is my on-premises environment. And within my SQL Server running on AWS, I can reference via the trust groups that are coming from the other side of the trust. And for my users, they're just going to log in with their existing credentials, use Windows integration, even if it's not in the same domain. And thanks to the trust, they're going to be connected to the machine, executing commands directly, and just interacting with the database as if it was an on-premises database. So really that single sign-on integration you have from end to end. You can also audit your AWS Microsoft AD logs. And you have access to the security logs. Really important to know what is happening on your environment. And you can get them and stream them and have them accessible directly to your environment. So here we just connect to the domain controllers using the Event Viewer MMC and just connect to the machines. We can filter them, and here I'm just looking at the Kerberos tickets that have been issued, so I can know exactly what are the users that have been connected, either successfully or not successfully to my platform. And you also have access to the DNS logs. So if you want to look and have more visibility, again, use the same familiar tools, just connect to the platform and get access to the logs. But what we see as well is that having access to these logs is good, but people want to have more visibility as well onto the platform. And AWS provides many features for auditing and logging, one of them being AWS Cloud Trail. So here, when I have a user that actually uses AWS Directory Service for connecting to one service. So here I'm just federating my user to have access to the AWS Management Console. I'm going to have a trace within the Active Directory event logs because I've just issued a Kerberos ticket. But I'm going to have the same log on the AWS side using AWS Cloud Trail because there's going to be one API call that is going to be, I want to sign into the console directly. And here I have the name of my user, so I can do reconciliation. And I can have full traceability and visibility over what's going on in my environment. And we have many other features that are provided. You have automated daily snapshots. If you do have specific attributes in your Active Directory schema, we also have a managed way to extend your AD schema. You just provide us an LD file. We're going to be managing the extension of your AD with automated rollback if it fails. You have fine-grained password policies. You have monitoring and alerting based on Amazon SNS, so you can be notified if something goes wrong with your environment. And finally, we have integration and management of the Amazon Enterprise applications, such as Amazon Workspaces, WorkMail, WorkDocs, and Chime. But security, as we've said, is really an important point. But having just application-level visibility or API-based visibility is not always enough. And many of our customers, actually, they want to have security and traceability down to the network level. So when Ron was speaking about the security groups and how you do configure your security groups to allow access from your on-prem to the AWS-based environment, it's actually a pure Amazon EC2 security group. You have an Amazon ENI, Elastic Network Interface, that exists in your VPC. So again, you have visibility, auditability, and control over what's going in and out of your AD environment. So here I can just select and manage my security group like I would any other security group within Amazon EC2. Again, familiar and simple. And as I'm in a VPC, I can actually have auditing. I can activate VPC flow logs and know every single network connection that is coming from my on-prem environment or from anywhere in the cloud to each of the network interfaces for my AD-based environments on top of AWS. So really, again, an easy way and a simple way to get this visibility and get access to these platforms. But you're going to say, reading NetFlow-like logs is not the best experience in your life, which I totally agree with. And what people want to have is they want to have dashboards. And leveraging some of the other services that we do have within AWS, here we're leveraging Amazon Elasticsearch Service and AWS Lambda. We can actually stream these logs directly from that VPC flow log format, which is a NetFlow-like format, and just stream them to a dashboard. So here I can have a dashboard that says, for this machine or these machines, I can have traceability over what amount of network was coming in the machine, what level of network was coming out, what were the ports, what was accepted, denied. So you can have much more visibility and full traceability over what's going on in your environment. So really one of the key features of that is this full visibility and auditability, which is actually really difficult to get on premises if you don't use all the auditability features from AWS. So what we've covered today, we saw some of the best practices for using and hosting Microsoft Active Directory for your AWS Cloud workloads, how to extend your AD to AWS, and how to manage your Microsoft AD domain. And finally, how to audit and secure your AWS Cloud environments. And how to get started. Getting started is really just one step away. You just create a new account or access an account you have within AWS. And AWS Microsoft AD is free for 30 days. So you can just start using it, test the trust, test the features, and see if it fits your needs. Just get to aws.amazon.com/directory service, access the log, access the documentation, all the service descriptions, just test it. It's really just one click away. Now we're going to be opening for Q&As. And you have the question pods that have been open, so you have the polls, so please fill up the surveys. That helps us be more efficient and deliver better webinars based on your specific needs, what level of complexity you want to have, and what topics you want to cover. And please, again, ask questions. You're going to have answers directly from our team of moderators, and we're going to take some of these questions directly online with Ron in the next few minutes. Again, thanks a lot for attending today, and we're going to get back for the Q&A in just a second. Thank you.